Dear Mr. Minister, the world community is currently going through very difficult times or conditions. On one hand, there is the threat from the United States of America against Venezuela. There is the Ukrainian war. There is the threat of a Polynesialist regime and crimes in the Gaza sector. And similar actions, that is, certain weapon-related attempts, so to speak, from the European Union. All this complicates our life. Given your valuable experience in the international arena, in international relations, do you think the world is heading toward collapse, or not? Or is it striving, on the contrary, to create a new order? And most importantly, what role will Russia, as a permanent member of the Security Council, play in all these processes, or in all these new orders that will begin?
If we analyze everything happening in the world, you mentioned some processes in the most diverse parts of the globe, but still, I would single out as one, if not the main threat, the actions of the European Union, or rather, the elite that has seized power in Brussels and is trying to subordinate national governments to itself, forcing them to neglect the interests of their own people, forcing them to reject those results that elections and referendums held in European countries give, and to submit to the usurpatory role of collective Brussels, the Brussels bureaucracy, which no one elected and whose composition is determined by compromises between legitimately elected national governments. More than once in history, Europe has become the source of all troubles, a spawn of crisis, the deepest phenomena. This includes slavery, the Crusades, when they tried to burn out any resistance with the sword. This is colonialism. These are, of course, two world wars that were started in Europe, and due to those ambitions, illusory, but still ambitions, that European leaders experienced. And now, unfortunately, Europe is again trying to dictate its conditions to everyone, its desires, which are externally connected with the Ukrainian crisis. It uses the Ukrainian crisis to assert itself, to put sticks in the wheels, and build intrigues against the United States and all those who want a just settlement. And the saddest and most dangerous thing about this is that in Europe, among these elites, and primarily in Brussels, but also in capitals such as Berlin, London, Paris, I'm not even talking about the Baltics, the theory and practice of Nazism is being revived. Frank Nazi approaches, frank ignoring of what the Nazi regime in Ukraine is doing, just as Hitler, and before him Napoleon. But under Napoleon, there was no Nazism. But Hitler, like Napoleon, put practically all of Europe under arms and threw all this Europe under Nazi banners at the Soviet Union. Now, Europe, and until recently the Biden administration, is trying to do the same thing, unite all European countries, pump Ukraine with money and weapons, give it a Nazi flag in its hands, which in fact was not necessary to do, because the Nazi flag was taken into its own hands by the regime that came to power as a result of the coup d'etat in 2014. And now under the Nazi flag, with European money, with European instructors, with European and generally Western intelligence data, Europe increasingly pumping Ukraine with modern weapons, Europe with Ukrainian hands, with the bodies of Ukrainians, is fighting once again with our country. And this revival, of militarism, when Chancellor Merz declares, "We have set the goal to again become the first main military force in Europe." He forgot that last time, when Germany became the main military force in Europe, it was under Nazi slogans and under slogans of conquering all other nations around Hitler's Germany and turning Slavs, Jews, turning them into slaves or simply into material for destruction by burning in ovens in concentration camps. And the fact that now many figures in Germany and other countries, in Finland, which was also Hitler's closest ally, including during the inhuman blockade of Leningrad, which was organized by the Nazis, the Finns actively participated in it, as did a number of other countries. Therefore, when now they all begin to remember their grandfathers, other relatives who served in the SS and were active functionaries of the Nazi Party, this cannot but cause alarm. But I don't want to create the impression that all the world's troubles come from the European continent. This is a very dangerous combination of European ambitions, understanding that these ambitions in Ukraine have failed because Russia is defending its legitimate interests, security interests, and the interests of those people whom the junta that came to power after the coup d'etat in 2014 declared non-humans beings, forbade them to speak their native language, generally banned their native language, banned the canonical Ukrainian Orthodox Church, which is unthinkable. Whatever the relations between, say, Israel and Muslim countries, no one bans religion. This is well known, but for Ukrainian Nazis, this is possible. Therefore, the whole set of problems that you listed, it of course attracts the attention of political scientists. And lately, there has been a lot of talk about the new national security strategy of the United States. One of the main goals of this strategy is to make Europe know its place, so that Europe does not try to impose liberal orders, which it was proud of for decades, and cooperated on strengthening these liberal orders with democratic administrations of the United States, so that Europe takes care of its own business, so that Europe does not try to continue to drag the United States of America into its games, rather unscrupulous games, aimed at promoting a liberal order that suits the European elite into the political life of all other states. Direct interference in internal affairs, including bans on election results, as happened in Romania and then in Moldova, and generally in a number of other countries. The rigging is absolutely obvious. And so, the national security strategy of the United States, it tells Europe, take care of your own business, and don't hope that we, the United States, will constantly support you in your adventures. We have more important things to do, first of all. As stated in this strategy, Latin America and the Asia-Pacific region, it's clear that the United States wants to build its policy, primarily to counter China, which has gained power, which shows increasingly higher indicators of economic development, financial might, and, of course, political influence with each passing year. And the United States doesn't want to remain in second roles. We are not against competition, as you know, but competition must be fair. When competitors try to suppress with 100% or even 500% tariffs, this is not the globalization that the United States called us to after World War II. When they impose sanctions, directly declaring that the reason is the political positions of this or that country or this or that person. This is not equality. This is not respect for human rights. This is dictatorship. And when these sanctions concern, say, a ban on the activities of the world's largest companies, as in the case with our company Lukoil, a private company, and the state corporation Rosneft, I see nothing in this except the desire to suppress competitors by unscrupulous methods. This means that for fair struggle, the West, including the United States, no longer always has enough strength, and they have to resort to preserve their dominant positions to unscrupulous, completely anti-democratic, anti-market methods. But I would like to finish the answer to your question that all this, unfortunately, is beginning to dominate over such conflicts as the Middle Eastern one, as the attitude toward the creation of a Palestinian state, as the attitude around the Iranian nuclear program, and everything that is happening on a global scale. This competition, the clash of great powers as they consider they are entitled to be called, is accompanied by an attempt to push these problems somewhere into the background, including the oldest unresolved conflict, the Palestinian question, and including issues that concern the Iranian nuclear program. They are very inconvenient because the latest development of events over the past year and a half, even a year, around the Iranian nuclear program, the absolutely outrageous illegal actions of Europeans, attempts to blame Iran for the fact that the Comprehensive Joint Action Plan fell apart, although Iran never allowed itself to violate this document until the United States, in 2018, stated that they were no longer bound by this UN Security Council decision. That is, the entire world order is undergoing the most severe tests. In the case of Iran, the Security Council resolution was thrown in the trash by the United States, and then the West, primarily Europeans, began to accuse Iran of not fulfilling the Comprehensive Joint Action Plan. Although I emphasize once again, this is so obvious that the West had to invent cunning schemes, and I consider this to have been a disgrace to European diplomacy when they fraudulently pushed through a decision to restore sanctions against the Islamic Republic of Iran. Real diplomats, honest diplomats, don't behave this way. That's how swindlers and thieves behave, actually. That they have theft, Europeans have it in their blood. We observe this in the example of frozen Russian assets. By the way, Iranian assets are also partially frozen, just as assets of Venezuela and many other countries are frozen. That is, such a craving for theft, it is apparently genetically inherent in many of our Western colleagues. Now they are starting to quarrel among themselves. You know, whether it's possible to steal Russian money. Some sane voices are heard there, but they are simply trying to drown them out in shouts from Brussels. It's not for nothing, by the way, that already in many mass media, in Russia and abroad, Ursula von der Leyen is called nothing other than Führer Ursula. Well, and the second glaring example is Palestine. Here it's not even just a Security Council resolution. A huge number of resolutions of both the Security Council and the UN General Assembly, which demand the creation of a Palestinian state as the cornerstone of settling the entire situation in the Middle East, as a condition for normalizing relations between Arab and Muslim countries with Israel. The well-known Arab Peace Initiative plan, which Saudi Arabia has been promoting since 2002, and which, by the way, became a pan-Muslim initiative, because this initiative was approved by the Organization of Islamic Cooperation.
Thank you very much for your broad and substantive assessment of what is happening in the international arena. Given the new development of events in international relations, tell me, please, Mr. Minister, what place do Iranian-Russian relations occupy in the foreign policy course of the Russian Federation?
This is one of our priorities, both from the point of view of our bilateral ties. In October, a strategic partnership treaty came into force, which was signed by Presidents Putin and Pezeshkian during the visit of your leader to Russia at the beginning of this year. The treaty came into force, as I already said, and it defines the principles of our mutual solidarity, mutual support on fundamental issues of the development of international relations. Well, and of course, the treaty defines additional steps that are necessary for the development of bilateral cooperation, increasing economic investment, trade ties, infrastructure projects. And in this sense, of course, the decisive role belongs to intergovernmental commissions on trade, economic, and scientific technical cooperation. This commission is headed by Oil Minister Mr. Pognijat and our Energy Minister Mr. Tsivilev. This is a very reliable, effective structure, and it will be engaged in developing concrete steps for implementing the corresponding trade, economic, investment aspects of the Strategic Partnership Treaty. If we talk about the economy, then additional opportunities are opened by relations between Iran and the Eurasian Economic Union. Iran, since 2023, has a free trade agreement with the Eurasian Economic Union. Observer status at the Eurasian Economic Union is a very rare case when such status is held by a country not part of this organization. And of course, the free trade agreement gives additional opportunities to Iran and participants of the Eurasian Economic Union to increase trade turnover. We have big plans with Iran regarding the development of our common geo-economic space in the context of those trends that are happening in Eurasia, where integration processes are becoming increasingly intensive and, I would say, increasingly competitive, because not only Eurasian countries in the corresponding parts of our common huge continent, but also extra-regional players, those who, say, are not Caspian states, are not Central Asian countries, are not South Caucasus countries, but, and first of all, these are our Western friends, of course, They constantly try to penetrate into the processes happening here, try to subordinate these processes to their unilateral interests, try to dictate to countries of the corresponding regions those decisions that suit, first of all, the West. This is absolutely unequivocally a continuation of colonial, neo-colonial policy, the essence of which was that the West always wanted to live at the expense of others. Here we observe the same thing, say, in the same Caspian region, where now the West is building its plans, trying to break up the Caspian Five, trying to impose decisions here that will not enjoy consensus of the Caspian states, although at the last summit of Caspian states, this was a long time ago, several years ago, it was adopted, signed in 2018, a convention on the legal status of the Caspian, where it is clearly fixed that all issues concerning the use of resources of the Caspian region, ensuring environmental protection, use of structures that guarantee security, all this is decided exclusively by the 5 coastal Caspian countries. And this is the most important principle. By the way, all countries of the Caspian Five ratified this convention, and only the Islamic Republic of Iran is next in line. And given the very rapid and turbulent development of events in the world and around this part of Eurasia, of course, it is very important to finally consolidate the principle of non-interference of non-Caspian countries. So we very much count on Tehran's ratification of this convention, especially since Iran has come forward with an initiative to hold the next summit of Caspian states in Tehran in August 2026. I hope that by this event, the convention will already be fully functioning in international legal and practical terms. Well, and in the meantime, from concrete projects that we are developing with Iran, this is, of course, the corridor, the international transport corridor north-south. There are 3 routes of this corridor: Western, Eastern, and Trans-Caspian. On all 3 of these routes, we are working very closely with our Iranian friends, including the speedy construction of the Rasht-Astara section of the railway, which will allow seamlessly, as we say, uninterruptedly ensuring transit from the Baltic Sea to the Persian Gulf. So we have very serious bilateral plans, as well as plans for cooperation in the international arena. This is both BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization I already mentioned, the Eurasian Economic Union. This is, of course, the United Nations, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, with which we interact closely. So international platforms, international venues, are actively used by our countries, together with other supporters of international legal, fair approaches to international affairs. And in this sense, it is characteristic that Iran and Russia are members of the group of friends in defense of the UN Charter.
Yes, dear Mr. Minister, you mentioned the strategic partnership agreement between Russia and the Islamic Republic of Iran. You gave specifics on this issue. Given the great potential that exists in this agreement between the 2 countries, now the level of trade turnover does not correspond to our political level. Currently, the trade turnover between the 2 countries is up to about $5 billion. What do you think? How can we increase the level of trade partnership between the 2 countries?
Yes, we really have possibilities immeasurably greater than the current level of trade turnover. Although I wouldn't forget that, in addition to trade, goods in exchange for goods or services, we also have investment cooperation. In addition to the North-South corridor, there is also such a flagship project as the Bushehr nuclear power plant, the construction of which continues. New blocks are planned and already in the works. This is also a very important dimension of our cooperation. How to expand trade turnover and economic ties in general. We need to stimulate our economic operators in every way, create conditions for them. As for state structures, it is very important to fulfill obligations in a timely manner, because when, for the same Bushehr nuclear power plant, significant amounts of debt accumulate for various reasons, I'm not talking about reasons now, but as a fact, then construction cannot move forward, since it needs to be financed. The North-South corridor, we are waiting impatiently for the Iranian authorities to finish the work on buying out land plots that will allow actively starting and completing the construction of this approximately 160-kilometre section of railway. There are fundamental factors, and I don't see any problems in them, meaning that this is the focus of our presidents, our governments, on comprehensive development of relations, on removing any artificial obstacles to these relations. And there are practical factors when already specific structures, ministries, companies, corporations must simply fulfill their obligations with utmost correctness, with utmost scrupulousness. So I am sure we have very good prospects.
The Islamic Republic of Iran and the Russian Federation are talking about relations in the military-technical sphere. In your opinion, can this cooperation become an integral part of the new order in the area of security in the Eurasian region, and a basis for the confrontation with the general threat in this region?
Undoubtedly, any cooperation that strengthens the defense capability of participants in corresponding processes, that strengthens their combat readiness, it, I believe, is a very significant, important contribution to strengthening peace, and in creating a situation where any aggressor will be discouraged from trying to implement their aggressive plans. And in this regard, of course, there were many initiatives in the past, including the declaration of the Middle East and North Africa as a zone free of nuclear weapons. We know how our Western colleagues did not very much contribute to this process developing positively. There is a very promising format that will undoubtedly contribute to strengthening security in the region, meaning relations between the Islamic Republic of Iran and the Cooperation Council of Arab States. We also very much hope that the normalization of relations between you and these Arab monarchies, especially the normalization of your relations with Saudi Arabia, will allow promoting some formats for strengthening security. Russia has already been advocating for almost a couple of decades for a conference that would be devoted to developing a security concept in the Gulf region, with the participation of directly coastal countries and with the participation of those states that neighbor you and your Arab colleagues. I believe that this initiative is becoming increasingly relevant, especially when they try to discriminate against Iran. From the point of view of that very Iranian nuclear program, try to deprive Iran of its legitimate rights. But it is very important that, in our assessment, your Arab neighbors do not support attempts to increase pressure on the Islamic Republic. But military technical cooperation is the basis of strengthening. Unfortunately, all agreements on maintaining the level of armaments were born after the parties became convinced of the futility of military methods of resolving conflicts. Nuclear deterrence is based on this same principle of mutual deterrence. We are open. We have the Collective Security Treaty Organization. We want to cooperate with the Islamic Republic and other neighbors, including through this structure. But when the Ukrainian conflict was unleashed, at the very beginning of this conflict, and in fact many years before the West carried out a coup d'etat in Ukraine, we repeatedly, starting in 2008, proposed to our European and American neighbors to agree on security principles in Europe. Then there was an initiative in 2010 and 2021 when we told the West that you were going a very dangerous path, setting Ukraine against the Russian Federation, pumping it with weapons. Let's agree on security principles, a treaty that would guarantee non-expansion of NATO. All this was ignored by the West, arrogantly rejected. And what we have now, sane voices, including in the United States, in some European countries, and in our structures like the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, advocate for the principle of arms limitation, arms control, including transparency, for all these schemes to be recreated again. And Iran and Russia are active supporters of such an approach.
Thank you very much. You mentioned the discrimination and discriminatory behavior of the West towards the Iranian peaceful atom. We are grateful to Russia for your position. Our people are also grateful to you, taking into account your position. Some people in Iran believe that after the United States of America and Russia, there is the same assessment in Iran, that some people believe that part of the Iranian program and part of the Iranian nuclear facilities were bombed. The agency did not say anything against this. Therefore, it does not make any sense for Iran to become a member of the NPT and comply with the principles of the NPT. What is your position on this matter?
On this account, there were detailed discussions between our presidents, Putin and Pezeshkian. There were contacts at other levels with my colleague Minister Aragji, with the advisor to the Supreme Leader, Mr. Larijani. We firmly defend the unconditional right of the Islamic Republic of Iran, like any other country, to access peaceful atom. As a conscientious member of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, Iran has every right to this. When the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action on the Iranian nuclear program was approved, it was a consensus. It was a Security Council decision. Iran undertook commitments on transparency and on IAEA access to its nuclear facilities and programs that went beyond the set of obligations of NPT member countries. Iran took on more obligations. And then the IAEA especially noted this as a very significant contribution to confidence building through increased transparency for Western countries that had corresponding suspicions. It seemed to us that all suspicions were closed. And when the US withdrew 3 years after approval of this plan by the Security Council, when the United States withdrew and said they would not fulfill anything, It seemed to us that this was a very sad development, and we tried to work with Europeans to convince Washington to return to fulfilling its obligations. Europeans preferred to blame everything on the Islamic Republic of Iran and activated a mechanism that was indeed agreed upon within the framework of the Comprehensive Action Plan, but it was agreed directly between the foreign ministers of Iran and the United States. Russia and China did not participate in developing this mechanism, which is unprecedented in world practice and allows any member of this group that worked on the Iranian nuclear program to say that Iran is not fulfilling. Therefore, I introduce a resolution, and no one can break this resolution. Sanctions will be restored automatically. When we learned in 2015 that such an outcome was found between American and Iranian negotiators, we inquired whether our Iranian friends were sure that this was correct. We were told that Iran is not going to violate anything, and we were convinced of this. Therefore, this provision does not carry any risks, but they did not take into account that the Americans could at any moment refuse to fulfill their obligations, which is what they did. This is not a mistake, of course, because no one doubted that Iran would not violate. But yes, trouble came from where it was not expected, as they say. But yes, I know that in Iranian society there were many comments afterwards, and now these comments are preserved, including attempts to somehow blame the Russian Federation for the fact that we didn't oversee something somewhere, didn't finish something. These are attempts with unsuitable means, and I understand that in every country there are politicians, and Iran is indeed a country where the most diverse opinions can be heard in the media space, in political affairs, but neither current nor former politicians, if we talk about this seriously, can present any claims to Russia regarding the fact that at all stages of negotiations we supported the Islamic Republic of Iran. You mentioned the last remark about whether Iran should remain in the Non-Proliferation Treaty. We are convinced that it should, and that this topic should not be presented this way in public opinion, criticizing everything that is happening. I understand that the IAEA issued a report that was not entirely neutral and not entirely objective. There were such subtle ambiguities formulated there. Mr. Grossi explained that this is quite within his authority, but remember with what enthusiasm Europeans, French, Germans, and English seized on this report. It was precisely this report that became the basis for introducing an anti-Iranian resolution. And ultimately, it was IAEA reports that were used to activate the sanctions return mechanism. The Russian Federation, in the person of the President of the Russian Federation, at the most diverse levels, participated in discussions with Iranian friends of the current situation. We have, had, and continue to have our own ideas, which we shared with Iranian friends about how to be in this situation, how to restore relations, on what conditions with the same IAEA, with the same Western countries, if you are interested in this. But the final decision, of course, is absolutely up to the leadership of the Islamic Republic.
Mr. Minister, I would like to tell you that since many questions remain, please answer briefly so that we don't run out of time. As for the United States of America, Israel and the West unite in efforts to put pressure on the Islamic Republic of Iran. What is the position of the Russian Federation in fighting this policy?
We work both with the Islamic Republic of Iran. We have channels of communication with the US administration. Europe doesn't want to communicate with us. They are all obsessed with megalomania. This is their choice, and in fact, there's not much to talk about with such leadership. But to Americans, we present our approaches on how the current situation around the Islamic Republic of Iran can be normalized. We are ready to provide assistance. I won't go into details, but there are completely concrete things that both our Iranian friends and Americans know about, who show interest in having this conflict also resolved by President Trump. I recently communicated with our colleague, the Foreign Minister of Egypt. He was very worried that the agreement that was concluded between Iran and the IAEA in Cairo a couple of months ago ceased to consider that Iran is obligated to something. I explained to him that this happened due to the fact that the IAEA then, after this Cairo agreement, issued a report that the European Troika used to cheat and by manipulations push through unlawful, illegal decisions aimed at restoring sanctions. I, for example, perfectly understand that the Islamic Republic of Iran in this situation cannot simply, as if nothing happened, take and again talk with the IAEA. We insist on access to those facilities that were subjected to bombardment. You at the beginning of our interview said that the agency did not condemn these bombardments, although bombardments of facilities that are under IAEA monitoring, namely such facilities, were in question. This is the grossest violation of all rules and all orders. Therefore, the fact that IAEA's actions caused, to put it mildly, not the most pleasant sensations in Iran, this is absolutely clear to me. But the question should rather be addressed to Mr. Grossi and his employees, so that still the principle of impartiality is manifested in full, so that they don't try, in some situations, to take political steps, playing along with one side or another. I, by the way, will mention the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, where IAEA observers have been present for almost a year now, if not more, and where every time when Ukrainians bomb the facilities of this nuclear plant, IAEA observers bashfully say that they don't know where these drones and these shells came from. This is also wrong, so we will in every way encourage the resumption of Iran's cooperation with the IAEA. But this cooperation must be honest.
Mr. Lavrov, everything you said about the bilateral agenda, that is, the relationship between Iran and the Russian Federation, is of great importance. This can become a model, and a model for imitating other countries. But some Western media have long been calculatingly trying to give the same idea that when there is a crisis, it is impossible to trust the Russian Federation. How could you answer them?
Why respond to an empty shell? Do they have any examples behind these statements that would convince everyone else that Russia cannot be trusted? I haven't heard such examples. If the example is, as they say, Russia's unprovoked attack on Ukraine, well, you know, such diplomats such arguments. The West misses past its ears everything that relates to real facts, which we remind about in the United Nations, in the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. I have already met about 10 times and will meet in the coming days once again with ambassadors accredited in Moscow, where we present documentary facts, present our analysis of the situation around the Ukrainian crisis. The West was warned from the very beginning. If Europe wanted to be an active participant in Ukrainian settlement, it had many chances. It failed all these chances, how to say it. 2014, when a coup d'etat was organized, Europe, on the eve of the coup, guaranteed that there would be a settlement between the president and the opposition. There would be early elections. Did nothing. The coup took place. Europe swallowed it and remained in its, so to speak, subordinate place to the then US administration. Then there were the Minsk agreements. Germany, France boasted that they mediated and reconciled Ukraine and Russia. Again, these agreements were approved by the Security Council. And then the French, Germans, and the Ukrainian who signed them in 2015, Mr. Poroshenko, the then president, said, no, we just wanted to buy time. No one was going to fulfill anything. And in 2022, in April, when the Ukrainians themselves, after the start of the special military operation, proposed peaceful settlement to us, with which we agreed, and signatures were already placed on the document was initialed. And then Europeans, in the person of the British, but with active support from Brussels and others, told Ukraine, no, we need to fight further. Therefore, those who accuse us, when you interview them, if such cases happen, ask them for facts. Where are the facts that at least once confirmed that Russia did not fulfill its obligations? Those who try to shift everything from a sick head to a healthy one say this. These are liars. We must call things by their proper names. But they lie, I already told you. Let them give at least one example when, for the sake of relations with some one country, even a big one, even a great one.
Thank you. At the moment, Trump is making some attempts to normalize relations between the United States and the Russian Federation. Some analysts in the Western world believe that if relations between the Russian Federation and the United States are normalized, then Russia will leave Iran. How could you answer them?
They lie. I already told you. Let them give at least one example when, for the sake of relations with some one country, even a big one, even a great one, we betrayed some other country, our longtime friend and ally. Such betrayal occurred, unfortunately, in the history of our country, but then it was called the Soviet Union. And in the last years of the Soviet Union, there was betrayal, including in relation to the German Democratic Republic, which was simply given over to be absorbed by the Federal Republic of Germany and the authorities of the Federal Republic of Germany. Simply like conquerors, took under their control all lands of the former German Democratic Republic. All political figures were removed from the road. No future was offered to them. That is, it was absorption. It was not unification. And the fact that now East German Germans perceive what is happening quite differently is quite indicative. This, yes, was a mistake and betrayal on the part of the Soviet Union, of its allies, when almost 500,000 military personnel were withdrawn without any compensation, when the opportunity to maintain its presence in the eastern part of unified Germany was ignored. We remember all this. Well, and of course, the authorities of then West Germany made a colossal mistake when they treated their compatriots after absorption in the eastern part, treated them as second-class people. Therefore, again, if such questions are asked of you, ask them to give an example of when and whom. Here they told us we betrayed Syria. We didn't betray anyone. We, from Syria, starting with Hafez Assad, Bashar Assad. And now, yes, events occurred that we consider in many ways to be an internal matter of the Syrian Arab Republic. But we have even stable relations with the new authorities. In general, let them give an example when, as it seems to them, Russia abandoned someone.
Yes, you talked about Syria, but given that Bashar Assad was an ally of Iran and Russia, can you tell us what happened in the final days before the fall of Bashar Assad? Yes, you talked about Syria, but given that Bashar Assad was an ally of Iran and Russia, can you tell us what happened in the final days before the fall of Bashar Assad? Why did his authorities turn away? Mr. Jolani said that at some point they turned away their watches and coordinated their approaches to the Russian Federation. What is your position, and how can you answer this question?
Mr. Jolani did not synchronize any watches with us, did not coordinate any approaches. Mr. Assad, we had very close relations with him. We came to the aid of his government in 2015, when Damascus was already practically surrounded and was about to fall before the attacks that the opposition was developing. Yes, we came to help. We created our military presence there, 2 bases, Air Force and Naval. We actively worked on destroying terrorist cells, cooperated with other countries of the international community, primarily with the Islamic Republic of Iran, with the Turkish Republic. And the process was going quite, I would say, positively. We remember the conference of the Syrian people that was in Sochi in 2018. Concrete agreements, but agreements reached by us with Iranians and with Turkish friends. They somehow stalled each time. Not in everything, of course. They depended on the government of Bashar Assad, but on the fundamental issue of national reconciliation, national accord, and invitation of all ethnic and political confessional forces to dialogue. Here I don't want to make some historical conclusions now, but many opportunities were missed, so I'll put it. And we, by the way, in Syria, when events began a year ago, we didn't have such combat units in Syria. We had 2 bases, Air Force and Naval. And that rapidity with which the opposition, led by Mr. Jolani, Mr. Shara, took territories, well, in general, it, of course, was unexpected. There was practically no resistance. And now we are in contact with the new authorities. Mr. Shara visited us. I met 3 times with the new foreign minister. Interdepartmental delegations visited the Syrian Arab Republic, including to discuss prospects of those agreements that were concluded on trade economic issues. In the course of all these contacts, we necessarily emphasize the fundamental importance of preserving the unity of the Syrian state. And for this, a nationwide dialogue is needed, including Alawites, including Sunnis, including Druze, including all ethnic and confessional, of course, and political groups. And here the problem of Kurds, it has constantly been in the center of attention for the last 15 years. Many try to play it in their own selfish interests. Americans, as they hold in the northeast such territory under the control of the Syrian democratic forces, and in every way, even since the previous administration, promote such separatist sentiments. This process continues. We believe that this is another such time bomb, so the main thing is to start a nationwide dialogue, which was lacking in Syria, including throughout the entire rule of Bashar Assad.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. But as you know, two regimes, Israel and the United States of America, repeatedly threatened the Islamic Republic of Iran. Again, I repeat that, as you know, two regimes, that is, Israel and the United States of America, have nuclear weapons and always threaten Iran with these weapons. What can Iran acquire? What can Iran use to disarm or increase its deterrent forces?
I already told you that we condemned attacks, unprovoked by anything, unjustified by anything, against nuclear facilities of the Islamic Republic of Iran, just as we condemned in their time such political assassinations of Iranian political figures, military figures. But now we discuss this in great detail with our Iranian colleagues. In the near future, I will have another meeting with my colleague, Foreign Minister of the Islamic Republic, Abbas Araghchi. We will continue this discussion. Iranians know our approach. They know how we are ready to contribute to getting out of this crisis, both in relations with the IAEA and in relations with the United States. There are such mechanisms in diplomacy that are not customary to make public. We also activate them. Our Iranian friends know our assessments. The decision on whether to resume dialogue with the United States, and we have heard that Iran is interested in this, whether to resume dialogue with the IAEA, we know here that Iran would like to resume it, but the decision is for the authorities in Tehran to make. We will be ready to provide all possible support to any actions that will be considered by the Iranian leadership as meeting the interests of the population.
Thank you. The European Union, under the pretext of peace and security, oppresses the authorities in different countries, as you said. During the 12-day war against Iran, when Israel attacked Iran, Mr. Merz, the German chancellor, said that Israel had done the dirty work that the West wanted to do against Iran. What is your assessment of his statement?
I don't want to pay too much attention to this. Mr. Merz has said a lot of things that are absolutely manifestations of racism, Nazism, old habits and genes that Mr. Merz inherited from his relatives. They don't die, they are preserved. This contempt, this arrogance, this feeling of being a representative of a special race, it manifested itself both in that phrase you quoted, as well as in many of his statements about what Germany should represent in the future. These are absolutely obvious revanchist ideas and, to a known extent, as I already said, misanthropic.
Trump recently gave a certain peace project about ending the Ukrainian war. What is your assessment of this? What are Russia's red lines?
There is a negotiation process. Our position is clear. Eliminate the root causes. The root causes are threats to the Russian Federation that were created by NATO's advancement eastward, directly to our borders and drawing Ukraine into it, and refusal to discuss our proposals on collective counter-security measures. And the threat is the destruction of everything Russian on those lands that for centuries were lands of the Russian people, Russian culture, Russian history, and turned out, by the will of historical chance, to a known extent, to be part of Ukraine. And when those who came to power as a result of the coup d'etat declared these people non-humans, declared that they would eliminate the status of the Russian language, sent militants to storm the Crimean Parliament building in February 2014, and swore to exterminate everything Russian. When the same Zelensky, having become president, advised everyone who lives in Ukraine and feels connected to Russian culture to get out to Russia, all this accumulated for almost 10 years. And when we warned everyone that these root causes would explode, no one listened to us. Therefore, now these root causes need to be removed. It's good that the Americans understood this. They clearly said that there can be no NATO. And they clearly said that those lands where Russians lived for centuries must again become Russian. And that the Russian language, Russian culture, rights of the canonical Ukrainian Orthodox Church must be restored. Europe is like a failing doctor who doesn't want to understand what disease you came to him with, but gives you just some pill or mixture so that you feel a little better for 5 minutes. But European doctors don't make diagnoses. But Americans are trying to figure it out, and recent contacts with them inspire hope that they understand our position more deeply and understand more deeply what needs to be done for this conflict to be resolved reliably and sustainably, and not just to take another truce to again pump Ukraine with weapons. Therefore, the process is ongoing. We are waiting for a reaction from Americans about how they talked with Ukrainians.